What's going on, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with another video, and today we've got the box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Spider-Man No Way Home once again reclaim the #1 crown at the box office. Scream 5 had it for just a week, and it has not been able to hold up since that time, and has really not held up well in comparison to even other films in the Scream franchise, but we'll go into that in a bit more detail, as well as some of the questions being asked about just how much money is Spider-Man No Way Home going to end up with by the end of its run. We also had a couple other new films come out this weekend, which made barely anything. One of which apparently was finished filming back in 2014, 2015, and has taken all the way until 2022 to finally actually get a distributor worth putting it out in theaters. And sure enough, when you wait that long, and when you have a concept that isn't even really promoted all that well, no one ends up going to see it. But before going any further into this bit of news, please make sure you smash the like button, lap that fire button if you're watching over on our Odyssey channel, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel to make sure with that bell notification on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. Hopefully everyone has checked out our video featured over on the Daily Wire. Pretty awesome stuff. Again, shout out to Ryan and Jeremy for being able to have that video out on the Daily Wire's YouTube channel. Go check that out if you have not done so already. But before anyway, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the bit of news we got. So Spider-Man leads quiet box office weekend as domestic cume grows to $721 million, with the question being asked, can the superhero take down Avatar? I would say with and without inflation, the chances of that happening are not very likely, even though some are comparing the film to say, hey, they're at similar points in their subsequent releases. There's a few things that are being not accounted for. For one, they are not using the numbers adjusted for inflation for Avatar, which means that it's not really at the same point in its release. And two, it is also taking out of the fact that that film, Avatar, saw a lot of growth and a lot of consistent numbers coming out week to week, whereas Spider-Man started off very strong and has seen very, very small drops week to week, but has not seen the immense amount of growth. Of course, you have to take into account as well that Avatar was being shown in premium screens for the vast majority of its run, including IMAX 3D, something that James Cameron was very big on trying to push, which helps to explain why it made as much money as it did. It's no secret that I personally don't quite understand why people like that film. I understand that people maybe like the Pandora ride in one of the theme parks, etc. But when it comes to the actual movie itself, it's Dances with Wolves meets Pocahontas meets Fern Gully, and all of those are films that I think have just done it so much better. So I don't understand how that film made as much money as it did. But is it actually going to be able to get to that point? I can already kind of give you the spoiler answer here, and that answer is no, most notably because of the difference between the two films when you actually adjust these numbers for inflation, which is something that Deadline and others have really not been doing, and therefore have not really been honest, I would say, in some of the markets, and also some of the records that they've been claiming for this and for other films. As you can see, also from Deadline, Spider-Man No Way Home zips to #6 on the all-time global box office chart with $1.6 billion. And again, that is a crap ton of money. It is awesome to see a film, and it really is a sign and a showing that if a film is made that gives fans what they want, that provides that little bit of crowd service, that little bit of fan service that many people are clamoring for, that people will go out to see it in droves, that it'll have a positive word of mouth campaign, and that you'll be able to have films like this make a crap ton of money. Maybe not always to the guaranteed success of a film like this to make over $1 billion, but still enough for it to easily make its money back and to have a massive amount of profit to boot. The issue, of course, that I have is with these numbers here, the #6 all time. This is the unadjusted number. When you adjust those numbers for inflation, things become a lot different, which is why, as some people have mentioned, even on my own channel, and even on channels, even on this channel, for instance, in the comment section, about how they really wish that there was a metric as far as, how many tickets were actually sold versus the amount of money being made. I totally agree. And of course, the big issue, especially when you talk internationally, is that there is no way of really tracking, and there is no tracking system for the number of tickets that take things into account, which is why the total box office number is the best indicator that we have, and also adjustment for inflation is really the best thing that we can do overall. If you look to the actual weekend itself, Spider-Man No Way Home took the number one spot back from Scream 5. Scream 5 enjoyed that number one spot just for a brief moment in time, as it has now dropped to the number 2 slot, making $12.4 million, which was almost a 60% drop, so not a terrible drop for that film. It has now reached $51.3 million domestically, while Spider-Man No Way Home is $14.1 million in its 6th week of release. Another 30% drop for that film. Film's still out at over 3,700 screens, so pretty crazy. It is still out in those many screens at this point in its release, up to $721 million domestically. Sing 2 came in once again at number 3 with $5.7 million, making a small amount of profit here. So again, congrats to Sing 2. Redeeming Love, another film from Universal, just came out. We don't have a production budget for the film, so it's hard to say whether or not the film is really much of a success at all. But it only made around $3.7 million, which actually isn't terrible when you keep into account that it only came out in around 1,900 screens. So when you compare that to, for instance, films like Sing 2, which are still out at over 3,000 screens, its per theater numbers actually not too shabby, but this is its first week of release. It's not likely to make a lot of money, and again, we don't really know what the film probably cost. Since this film definitely comes across as more of a low-budget film, I would say something in the $10 to $20 million range would make some sense. The question, of course, is it going to even be able to make enough to make that kind of money back? I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. Kingsman continues to stick around with 1.7 million. So again, small drop-offs, but starting to run out of screens. And because it had such a slow start, really not a whole lot left for that film to really make. The 355 continues to plummet as well, even though technically one could argue it had a strong hold with 30% of a drop, with it only making $1.6 million versus the $11 million it's made domestically so far. Not looking very good for that film. But if we're going to talk about films that are just really, really sad, The King's Daughter. So this is the film that came out, actually, it was finished its principal photography back in 2014, and it took several years for the film to finally get picked up and actually put out on release. It has been released by Gravitas, and it was released in over 2,000 screens, and it made only $750,000 for the weekend, which breaks down to a $346 per theater number. That's one of the lowest numbers that I've seen in a long time. I thought the 355 had a pretty low number, and then this film came along and kind of just wiped the floor with them. West Side Story is still around, and yet still going to be yet another massive financial failure for the 20th Century Studios logo. As I said, I was going to compare some of the films for Scream, because I know that some people have had some interest in how it's compared to some others in the franchise. And even though we do not have any of the daily numbers from the original Scream film, as that film came back out in 1996, we don't really have that data, at least at this point. When you compare this film to films like Scream 2, Scream 3, Scream 4, you can see that even though it is doing better than films like Scream 4, it is doing barely anything next to films like Scream 2 and Scream 3. At this time, in its release, it's at $51 million. At the time of Scream 2, that was $109 million. At the time of Scream 3, it was $96 million. Scream 4 dropped all the way down to $35 million. So even though it is definitely outpacing the previous film in the installment, which was Scream 4, all of these numbers have been adjusted for inflation to keep things as fair as possible. It is, again, doing marginally better than the last film in the franchise, Scream 4, but in comparison to the rest of the franchise, it seems that even though some people had some genuine interest in the film when it first came out, and some of that held over into the sequel, once that third film came along, really only hardcore fans were left behind. Even though some hardcore fans are pretty happy with what they've gotten with Scream 5, they've lost pretty much any other person at this point, if you actually look at the numbers in their proper context. Spider-Man is at $1.6 billion. I thought it was going to go into $1.7 billion this weekend, and so that was, again, something that I got incorrect. I also thought it was going to reach $1 billion internationally, so it looks like right now, because of the fact it is slowing down as much as it is, I would say that the $1.75 billion is still very much within reach, but I don't really know exactly how much more the film would be able to make than that. I think $2 billion, we can now say very firmly, is out of the discussion for this film, not being released in other countries potentially as well. But still, even with that being the case, it is still a massive success when you compare this film to other movies in the same universe, other films adjacent in the same universe, right? So the MCU film, since this is technically also primarily a Sony product, still an impressive feat nonetheless, with the film going to be ending its run with around $1.75 billion. Redeeming Love, as I said, not making much of anything. King's Daughter, not making much of anything. The sad thing about The King's Daughter is that we actually do have a budget for this film, and because it was made back in 2014, that means that the budget's actually higher than what's being reported because you have to adjust those numbers for inflation. 355 continues to be just a massive disappointment. Once again, $13 million, just abysmal in comparison to the $75 million production budget. Keep in mind, to break even, you have to make 2.5 times that production budget. Look at how this is only at 0.2 times its production budget worldwide. Oh man, it just, again, it's always great to see when films go woke and go broke and just show that these people just don't quite seem to understand, that Hollywood just can't quite grasp this concept around their brains. Matrix is still around, and it is making a little bit of extra money, in fact, especially in the international box office. But when you remind yourself that that's because Warner Brothers did a deal with the devil and released the film in China, and it's made over $10 million in China, of which, of course, and this is what it gets really sad, $7.5 million of that, guess what, went to the Chinese Communist Party. So, hey, thanks, Warner Brothers, for continuing to supply millions upon millions of dollars because of your releases, and really any other studio who continues to put their movies out in China, as millions upon millions of dollars from these Hollywood films have indeed led to millions of dollars being poured into the CCP, which allows for them to continue their iron grip on all of the various people in their country and treat them like trash, and all we can do is hope and pray that one day they will be overthrown. But anyway, what are y'all's thoughts about the box office? Again, you can check out my chart over at OMB Reviews. If you want a fuller box office breakdown, check out my channel OMB Reviews on YouTube and on Odyssey. I'll have that out a little bit later today, and you'll be able to see how Scream 5 is actually very much at the point of profitability. It's made $5.5 million in profit at this point in time. So even though it is not nearly as impressive as some of the earlier films in the franchise, because of its really small budget of $24 million, meaning it's break even with $60 million. The film at this point being at $69 million makes the film profitable. The film is expected to make somewhere between $33 and $47 million in net profit. So even though it's profit, don't necessarily know if that's going to be able to make up for the cost of what Paramount spent on the company that owned this IP. We'll of course have to wait and see what the final result is, and also if it's able to do much of anything on physical media. Those are all my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, slap that fire button over on Odyssey. Y'all are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.